original story written just for Mr. Wadnut. This is the story about a country called Rodentia. Things in Rodentia were in a very bad way. You see, people who lived in the country of Rodentia were all mice. And of course, you know the favorite food of mice is cheese. Well, the country was running out of cheese. Everyone was very upset and excited about it and didn't know what to do. So the king called all the mouse ministers together to see what could be done. And the king asked the prime minister, "What can be done?" And soon all of the cheese in Rodentia would be gone, and no one would have anything to eat. And there was only 4 weeks' worth of cheese left. Now the king declared a national emergency, but that didn't get them any cheese. And they held more meetings and more conferences, and the days passed, and the cheese supply got lower and lower and lower. And soon there were only 2 weeks and 3 days left before the cheese would be gone. Now the people of Rodentia began to get very worried. And every day they read in their newspapers and heard on the radio and television how the cheese supply was getting lower, and about all of the meetings that were being held in the king's palace. And one of the people that heard all about these problems was a little mouse boy named Tom. And Tom, after a while, he figured he'd better go and see the king. So he traveled off to the king's palace to see what he could do. And when he got there, he went up to the palace and walked right in. And Tom wandered about the palace a little bit until he found a room where the king and all his ministers were meeting. And he opened the door just wide enough to slip through. And then he walked right up to where the king was standing. "Sir," said Tom in a big and brave a voice as he could, "Who are you? What are you doing? And where did you come from? What do you want?" sputtered the king. "Sir, my name is Tom, and I've come to help with the cheese." "What do you mean you've come to help with the cheese? Who let this kid in here anyway? I've got the wisest men of my entire country here, and they can't help with the cheese. How can you help with the cheese?" "Why don't you go home and play something? Guard, get these boy out of here." "Please, sir, please listen to my plan. Then if you don't like it, I'll go away." "Well," said the king, who was not a bad king, "all right, if your plan can't be any worse than what some of my ministers have come up with." "Oh, thank you, sir. My plan is really very simple. Everybody knows that the moon is made of green cheese, right?" "Why, yes, of course it is," answered the king. "Well, then, why don't we just go to the moon and open a cheese mine?" "A what?" "A cheese mine. And once we've done that, we'll never have to worry about cheese again." "Very well," said the king. "In 1 week we shall leave for the moon." Oh, the following week Tom was very, very busy. He got some of his friends together and they started to build their rocket ship. And at the end of the week, the rocket ship was built and ready to go. And the king, he came to the launching pad and he made his speech and he gave Tom and his friends each a medal. And they climbed into their rocket ship, closed the doors, adjusted the controls, and waited for the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, fire! And off went the rocket, with Tom and his friends on their way to the moon. And they all watched out of the windows as the earth grew smaller and smaller as it got further and further away. And then they went to the other window, and they watched as they came closer and closer to the moon, and it seemed to grow bigger and bigger as they got closer. Then Tom spun the rocket around, and the spaceship settled gently down onto the moon's surface. This was the moment that they all had been waiting for. At last they had landed on the moon, and a whole moonful of green cheese. Never before had Tom and his friends been so excited. "Come on," said Tom. "Let's get out of there and get at that cheese. There are lots of hungry people back in Rodensia that are looking to us to bring them back lots of cheese." So they all scrambled out onto the surface of the moon with shovels and wheelbarrows, all ready to start digging the cheese and wheeling it back to the spaceship. But what a surprise. There was no cheese. Just lots of stones and dirt and gravel. And no matter where they looked or how long they looked, they couldn't find anything but moon dirt. So Tom went back to the rocket ship, got his walkie-talkie radio, and called the king back in Rodensia to tell him that there wasn't any cheese on the moon, and that when the cheese ran out at home, there wasn't going to be any coming from the moon to feed them. Tom and his friends were very sad as they rode back to Earth on the rocket ship. They didn't watch the moon and the stars out of the window. They didn't watch the Earth coming closer and closer. They just sat there very quietly and felt very, very sad. Now, at the same time, back in Rodensia, the king very excitedly called in his prime ministers. "Prime Minister, what's happening? Suddenly people from all over the world and countries all over the world are coming to me and they're asking, what can we do for you? Can we sign a treaty with you? Why, most of them didn't even know we existed until a couple of days ago. What's the meaning of it all?" "I think, Your Highness," answered the Prime Minister, "that it has something to do with Tom going to the moon. From what I understand, Tom is the first person to ever landed on the moon." "Really? I would have thought someone else would have done it by now," said the king. "So would I," said the Prime Minister. "But it came that no one has ever done it before. Now they all want to be friendly with us and give us things so that we'll tell them how we did it." "I have no idea how we did it," said the king. "Tom's the only one who knows that." And just at that moment, what? You're right. Tom's rocket ship landed on the palace lawn, and Tom got out and came into the room where the king was. And he walked very slowly, and he was very, very sad. "Your Highness, I'm terribly sorry that I failed in my plans to find cheese for our people. I'm ready to take whatever punishment you have for me." "Punishment?" exclaimed the king. "Why, my boy, haven't you heard? You're the most powerful country in the world now. We've got enough cheese to last us 100 years. All of the other countries in the world brought it to us in hopes that we'd tell them how we got to the moon. You will tell them, won't you, boy?" "Oh, of course I will," said Tom. "Is it really true that we have all the cheese we need?" "It certainly is," said the king. "And you are a national hero." "Well, I'll be," said Tom. And so all the people of Rodensia and all the cheese they needed and the other countries of the world learned how to fly rockets to the moon, and Tom lived the life of a national hero from that day on. That was kind of fun, wasn't it? Of course, we know it isn't true, and we know that there isn't any green cheese on the moon, because Wallingford came back and told us that, what? It was dirt and stones and big holes called craters, and that there didn't seem to be any people living there. But it did give us a beautiful sight when we look up at night, doesn't it? That's right. And sometimes people use it to find their direction or to know where they're going. That's one way that the moon is very helpful to us. But I bet when our astronauts or our space pilots really get to the moon, they'll come back and be able to tell us what it's really made out of, what kind of stones, and whether there are any kind of minerals or different things there, right? And I hope you really watch that when that happens, okay? Okay. Come and see me again in the Whatnot shop. Goodbye, Wallingford, wherever you are.